So I want to welcome all of you to the Eugene Maker Space's Kickstarter panel that we've got with us. 5 local folks who have had successful Kickstarters, or actually 4 who've had successful Kickstarters, and 1 who had some last-minute reservations that they'll tell us about, I'm sure. So maybe the easiest thing to do would be if I could ask you to, in fact, pass the mic and go down the line and have you introduce yourself and talk about Kickstarter, or if you want to talk about Kickstarters, do that one current.
Good. If you can't hear me, just say so. Speak up. My name is Noelle Doss, and I'm a local artist. I sell my paintings and T-shirts. I've been doing that for about 10 years. And I used the Kickstarter project to start a new line of T-shirts about a year ago.
My name is Garrett Lovell. I started a brand called July 9 a year and a half ago. After Eugene passed the bag ban, I found myself at the Gap buying socks without a bag. So I carried them out in my pocket and something in the jacket and all that stuff. And then that night, I designed this bag. It's a roll-up, reusable bag. It's nylon and leather. It's kind of my response to that thing. I felt like a lot of bags we had available weren't really fashionable, not trendy, whatever. They just didn't function well. So I wanted something that was unique. And so through our Kickstarter, it did really well. We got our funding in 66 hours. So that was pretty fun, and then it was a pretty wild ride from then on out. Yeah, we definitely talk about fulfillment and stuff. And a lot of positive response from us, so it was a fun project.
My name is Tim O'Donnell. I'm the founder and creative director of Camerosity Improv Theater, a local improvisation theater group. I used Kickstarter last summer to fund my first show and kind of provide the seed money for starting the company.
Hi everyone, my name is Piotr Zentębski, or Peter, for easier it's Peter. I'm an embedded systems engineer. I started a company with a few friends back when I lived in California. We designed a vertical takeoff, vertical landing, flying wing. It's basically a quadrocopter. Maybe probably most of you already saw something like that, but it has a wing attached to it. And we ran a Kickstarter campaign in September 2011, so it's already a while ago. It was before actually Kickstarter became what it is now. It was much smaller back then. And we had a successful Kickstarter. We produced 500 of the wings and sold them to the people.
I'm Craig Godwin. I'm a Chief Technology Officer at a company called LightDance, which is a local startup here in town. We make a little consumer electronics product that I have sitting behind me here that's designed to enhance your music experience by having lights respond to your music as you go. So when we first talked about this Kickstarter campaign, we had planned to be in the middle of a big Kickstarter at this point. We talked to a number of investors and looked at various things and decided not to do a Kickstarter. So I'll save the details of why we decided Kickstarter was not a good fit for our business until we get a little further into the discussion.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves and saving me from mangling your names. I appreciate that, especially you, Peter. Just to do kind of a quick sense of the audience here. So how many of you have never heard of Kickstarter and just sort of showed up to find because, I don't know, free coffee or something? No? Okay, everybody's heard of Kickstarter. How many of you have pledged on a Kickstarter campaign? That's quite a few. And how many of you want to run your own Kickstarter campaign at some point? Okay, that's great. Any of you use other crowdfunding sources like Indiegogo or something else of that nature? No? Okay. So Kickstarter is sort of the kind of the big name in crowdfunding right now, I suppose. And so, actually, the first crowdfunding project that I ever heard of happened in 1998. It was so kind of prior to Kickstarter. My wife Jen was wanted to go back to grad school and figured that she needed about $6,000 and wrote what were called letters to everybody that she knew. We used the technology at that time known as stamps to get that out to people. So, I mean, crowdfunding as an idea is a little bit older than Kickstarter. That did work out pretty well. So we didn't have to get 10% off the top to But she's kind of an exceptional case in a lot of ways. So so for our panelists here, I'd like to ask for each of you, sort of prior to doing the Kickstarter, sort of what was your experience in the area that you had? So, like Tim, you had YC first, I guess, because this is something you had. You were doing theater things before, before this one.
Yeah, I have about 10 years plus experience in improvisational theater. I'm actually currently right now, I'm at U of O finishing up my theater arts BA way later in life than I should be, but that's another matter to talk about. But yeah, definitely, I was a huge part of the theater world. Theater was a huge part of my life since high school and moving forward. So it's something that I've had a lot of experience in, something that I've kind of lived in for most of my life now.
Okay. Why did you choose Kickstarter as the sort of funding mechanism for doing the Camera Suite project?
Well, I think that especially for an improvised show in town, and just any theater in town in general, it's not a guarantee that I'm going to make my money back on a show. It's just kind of a roll of the dice, especially here in Eugene, because it's very easy to get people to show up one time to something. It can be more difficult to get people to show up again. So I thought that having kind of a guaranteed audience from people who had already kind of pre-committed to the show would kind of ensure that the show would be financially successful and that this new company that I was trying to establish would be financially successful.
Who wants to ask?
I've been sewing since I was about 10 years old, so as far as how to make things, things like that, that was something I had a lot of experience with. I majored in engineering at Oregon State, so as far as strength, geometry, things like that, that was something I had experience on. This was my first large-scale project, though. Our first run was 2,600 bags, so that was something I had really no experience on, and I had to ground running. I didn't really quantify that pallets of material that had to fit in my car afterwards wasn't going to fit in my car afterwards. That's about 600 pounds of bags, and then you think the post office somehow in things with Samsung. So yeah, it was something I really had learned very, very quickly about how to get things at wholesale prices, where to get my distribution channels through and stuff like that. But my background is mostly in engineering. Yeah. Oh, and I chose Kickstarter. Kickstarter was something I wanted to do for a while, but it was the number one reason for me to choose it was marketing. Kickstarter, as we're saying now, is massive. It did almost $500 million last year in funding, and I would venture to say that a product will be seen by 100,000+ people. So for me, it was strictly marketing, getting my brand out there in front of people. Whether it was successful or not, I wanted people to know the name July 9. So when they saw it again, there would be some repeat business down the road, and that paid off quite well with contracts after the Kickstarter choose. So for me, it was strictly just marketing and brand recognition, and then I made some money in it too. So.
Same question. What's your background? You've done, I know that you've done a fair amount of art prior to this.
Yeah, well, my project was specifically for T-shirts. So I mainly did some of my paintings, artwork as prints and originals, but I wanted to do a new line of T-shirts. I already done T-shirts, so I knew about, I already had a local screen printer that prints them for me. So I already had my supplier where I purchased them from. So luckily I had that under my belt. And there wasn't any complications in my project in that area. My struggle was fulfillment. I guess I'll wait till we get to that. And I chose Kickstarter mainly because I had read about it, and it's seemed really popular and thought it was worth a try.
So, Peter, why did your group end up going with Kickstarter?
Yeah, so we basically the choice that we went with Kickstarter, I basically convinced everyone to do this. So the reason was I already knew of Kickstarter myself from a different project before that I backed myself. And I compared it to other platforms because Indiegogo already existed at that time and stuff. And I came to the conclusion that because of the structure, how Kickstarter is structured, with you only pay after the funding goal is reached, and also their at that time much stricter checking of the projects, what I would say they are not as good at anymore as they used to be.
Sorry, Kickstarter or
Kickstarter itself, they were checking the projects if it is a viable, interesting project to put on their platform. Indiegogo doesn't really have any blockades, you can put anything almost on it. That was important to be not amidst of a lot of mediocre, weird projects, what Indiegogo has. And if they accept us, this is basically already a first step of validating that maybe we are doing something right or wrong if they reject us. So Kickstarter was, that's why I chose this, and also the already traction that it was getting at that time was a good thing for the marketing, as you said. And because a lot of outlets that would provide the advertisement later, but it's basically because you have to use other people to like push your product, push your campaign. They already knew about it, and they had some built up anticipation of the projects that are on that platform. My experience prior to that was mostly engineering in small scale. I just finished school 3 years prior to that, and I was working on UAV systems and electronics for a little bit, but I did some production runs of the electronics that went into the system, but nothing in that scale. So definitely scaling up was a learning process to figure out what the best sources are, which manufacturers to find, what parts to get, where to get them, at the quantities we need them, and where to manufacture it. It's like, do we do some parts in the U.S. At local manufacturers? Do we go to China to manufacture, assemble stuff, and so on and so forth? So it was a very steep learning curve, definitely, because we didn't do anything in that scale or brought a product to an actual consumer beforehand. So it's mostly just engineering before.
So prior to our considering Kickstarter, at least, I've done a number of product launches ranging from spectacular failures, that was most of them, to I did one that's done $80 million so far and do about $20 million this year. So pretty wide range of things. I'm a huge fan of Kickstarter, and if you wanted to be after my initial thing, our company, since we decided to be on this panel, decided we're not going to do Kickstarter. And it's probably good at times to explain some of the basics behind that without getting into a lot of detail. But when you have a Kickstarter campaign, particularly one that has to be fairly substantial, you have this interesting thing where you create a business model to be successful on Kickstarter, then Kickstarter ends, then you have this no man's land while you try to recreate your company in a sustainable manner. So being a company that's trying to produce large volume of product, if we went on Kickstarter and had a wildly successful campaign, which might be $100 grand, that's not enough for us all to quit our day jobs, but it's too much for us to not quit our day job. So you're frantically trying to assemble $100,000 for the product, and you don't have a business model behind it. So looking at what we wanted to do, we may come back and do a Kickstarter, but the scale of Kickstarter that we were trying to do is generally only done by established companies who are doing sort of what Garrett was talking about there, trying to validate a new product and trying to market the product and not necessarily create the funding to launch a sustainable business. So I can go into more detail on that one with other topics.
So this, and I know that you had put a fair amount of effort into preparing for Kickstarter as well, so that, working on video and that type of a thing. So is that material that you were putting together for Kickstarter still useful to you and other, and what you're going to be doing for it?
Yes, so there's still a business plan. We're still pitching to investors. We're just pitching to angel investors as opposed to individuals on Kickstarter. And I have an example that maybe I'll hold for later, but a colleague that had some involvement in a large-scale Kickstarter, similar thing, a consumer electronics product. They put it on Kickstarter, $40,000 target. They made $159,000, which would be one of the, definitely in the small percentage of very successful Kickstarters. They lost a fortune on that, almost went bankrupt. It was just a massive disaster where for that type of product, they really needed to make about $500,000 to make it fly. They put a low target to make sure it got some hype. But so I'm a big fan of Kickstarter. There's certain projects that are fantastic for Kickstarter, and certain projects that aren't.
Could you say what you think from your perspective, which would be good projects versus not good projects? If I might ask.
Yeah, no, that was kind of my next question on my list, is what is different about crowdsourcing versus sort of venture capital? So,
Well, like a great project for Kickstarter, the Bijou Theater raised $50,000 on Kickstarter, which is one of the more successful Kickstarters out of the local area here. That was a one-time, well, A was an established business, so they weren't basically creating a separate business to run a Kickstarter, separate from what they wanted to do in the long term. The business already existed. It was a one-time thing. It was a altruistic type campaign as well. So there are people that donate enough money to get some theater tickets, but also people that donate a lot of money to upgrade their projection system. That's just one example. There's a lot of different things. I would say probably the easier way to answer the question is things that aren't a good fit for Kickstarter. And to me, at least, a lot of product-based, like a physical product, where you have to scale up and then kind of get through this no man's land while you establish your business. I'd be interested to hear what Garrett has to say about that, because he's got kind of a similar situation to what we were looking at.
Yeah. As far as things you probably should stay away from on Kickstarter, like another, I mean, basic simple answer to that is anything you can't ship. So I've seen people make stuff that's really big and you can't ship it. Some ideas you can't ship, like pretend you're at a theater thing. You can't have someone in New York attend a show in Oregon unless they're willing to fly out here and see it, you know. And Kickstarter is a global website. I ship products in 60 countries. The other thing is food on Kickstarter. A lot of great food vendors are on Kickstarter. But you can't mail a sandwich to somebody that you expect to be fresh. You can't mail ice cream to people. It tastes great, but you can't mail it. And you can't mail alcohol on to the U.S. Postal Service. And so there was another one that I thought I should be here today. They ran a local campaign, and they did not become successful on Kickstarter because the fundamental thing is you can't mail alcohol, and they're alcohol. So it's like, you know, it's little things like that. But yeah, that's what I see.
Have you worked with venture capital in addition to your success with Kickstarter? Since you walked through that process?
Not like per se. I mean, I have received some private funding for other things with visual and business, but I haven't gone out and sought out angel investors and things like that yet. So far as mine has been pretty much a self-funded thing with the Kickstarter funding and stuff like that. But now that it's starting to grow a little bit more, and I'm in a bigger space and things like that, I might need to partner with some people to get that instead of self-funding the next run of stuff. So yeah, I'll look at it.
Peter, do you have any experience with other types of more traditional forms of funding a business in addition to Kickstarter, or any observations on the contracts?
So we didn't sort out VC funding. That's we didn't do that, and I personally am rather reluctant to do that because my experience or what I heard is basically you are giving up a lot of your part of the business basically for the VC funder at the end, and it's like I don't want to end up with a situation. It's like, yeah, I gave you a little bit of money to make it going, but 60% of your revenue in the future is mine. So unless you have a better deal, it's for me it's a difficult sell. But we had some private additional funding. This is something I wanted to confirm here is the difficulty is after the Kickstarter. Getting a successful Kickstarter, at least from what I've seen, is much easier than actually moving forward after the Kickstarter. The project itself is like we were reasonably successful. We asked for $25,000, got $84,000. At that time, that was one of the bigger Kickstarters at that time. This is not big anymore by any means, but we thought, well, it was quite good. The problem was we should have asked at least for $100,000, not $200,000, and to make it carry forward through the gap that comes behind the Kickstarter, where you have the money in your bank account, you have to produce the product, you are slammed with work to get it out there, and then you have to get through this, ship it to the people, and then continue on building the business, as you say. So this, in our case, it didn't happen. It's like, it's basically like flared off. It's like the company still exists, and by now I left the company, so it's like I'm restarting everything from scratch, from what I can do after moving from California to here, because the project was still in California back then. And I would be very reluctant to do it the way we did it back then again. I would rather, again, as you say, start a company first and try to get it to a level where you have already the infrastructure to run a Kickstarter campaign on top of that, and not use Kickstarter to start a company in the first place. It's like that's something that that was my experience.
That's interesting. We'll get more into sort of the horror of what happens after you've had a successful Kickstarter as we go along here.
I didn't know if it was on the same topic.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure what our audience knows totally about Kickstarters. I just wanted to mention that it's strictly for profit. So if anyone has any projects that are more non-profit or a little more altruistic, it might not be the right platform for that. I recently submitted a project. I got denied because it was too altruistic. I was going to donate a piece of art for each new painting that I did. So it's kind of pledged for one, and then I also donate one to an animal welfare clinic or a hospital. And they turned it down because it was too close to a profit or something. So
yeah, they have it in their rules basically. It's like this is what one of the big differences between Indiegogo again, and so Indiegogo was started as a crowdfunding for altruistic and goodwill projects originally,
right.
While Kickstarter was actually for artists to make their art. That was the original idea.
Yeah, and actually, I know that early interviews with the founders of Kickstarter, they talked about that they really thought that something like theater productions would be, or music productions would be the biggest thing that it would be used for. It would get pre-selling of tickets for events. Although, you know, as I looked through the list of what's been successfully funded in Eugene, it's primarily, you know, there's a lot of musicians out there, but it's not for concerts, it's for on my CD or that kind of thing. So.
This might be a good place to add. You're talking about VC versus Kickstarter. And a VC and Kickstarter are sort of on opposite end of the spectrum most of the time, at least. So when you look at funding of your business, it usually starts with personal funding, then you have friends and family once you get beyond what you can do yourself. You go up the scale, you have angel investors, and VC is towards the top, and past VC, you have things like an IPO, where you go public and sell your stock. So VC normally comes in at the $1 million plus range. So that typically doesn't overlap with 99.99% Kickstarters if you go to a project. There's a tiny percentage that might.
Is that $1 million in funding or $1 million in company valuation?
Generally $1 million in funding. I met with some VCs from New York earlier this week, and they do between a $1 and $10 million. That's their sweet spot. How much they invest? They'll invest between $1 and $10 million. To get to the point where they'll look at investing $1 million in you, they also want to see $1 million of sales. So they're a VC that most VCs look at companies pretty established. The risk is a lot less, but they're also investing a lot more in you at that point. So VC generally won't invest in, I got a great idea that's going to be the next big thing. You need to prove it and take it a pretty long ways before VC is involved.
Yeah, but I think Angel is more overlapping with the Kickstarter partners, right? So much smaller amounts.
So I wanted to also, just as Peter and Kara, you both mentioned this, that Kickstarter was a big part of your reason for working with it was marketing, or sort of it's a proof of your concept as being worthwhile, that you've had a little bit of vetting before it's gone out into the public. What other things did you sort of get from Kickstarter working through the process? What was Kickstarter? What sort of mentoring or sort of feedback as you went through the process did you get from the people that you were working with from Kickstarter?
I mean, obviously you get comments. I think the negative ones stick out more than the positive ones. But for me, I learned, what colors are popular. That was a big one. For me, like I said, my biggest thing, as afterwards, like you're mentioning down there, is how do you take the business to the next stage? And that's something that you should think about. I really should have thought of that one prior. But for me, I got 25 to 30 people saying we want to do wholesale when this thing funds. It's done. So I just started a list, names, emails, whatever. And afterwards, when everything was done and shipped, I contacted them. And that list generated another 8 to 10 wholesale contracts right after it. So we immediately went into production for a second round and stuff. And so that kind of carried the business farther. So I think that's kind of what came out of it. I got very little mentoring. I contacted Human Wall. They're based out of Beaverton. They did a project that did $300,000. And if your Kickstarter does go fast, it comes at you like a freight train. It comes at you so hard, so fast, you have no idea what you're doing. You're just trying to keep your head above water. So I called them and said, like, what is going on? I'm getting contacts from people in China saying they stole my logo, that my website's going to be hacked. I mean, I had everything from copyright infringement to patent infringement and all kinds of stuff, all within about the first 2 weeks. And then on top of that, I had people from like Andy saying they wanted me to show up for giveaways and stuff like that. And I had no idea how to answer these questions. And so I got a little mentoring from them, just basically saying no to everything. Just focus on the Kickstarter,
Can we have additional discussion on intellectual property, patent protection, patent searches, patent trolls, trade names, all that stuff?
Yeah, I know a little bit. I think you might have a lot on that. For me, I think a patent is only as good as what you can enforce legally yourself. I don't have the capital to do it, so I'm not going to put the capital involved in paying. This is not patented, so please don't steal it. I do have a registered logo. I thought that was important just for intellectual property's sake. But for me and my small company, I chose to not go any legal route in patent. I did file, like I said, a trademark. You can watch a 30-minute YouTube video. It costs you about $300, and they won't really well for me. So that's good.
Yeah, question. The dealers that popped up, was that something that you were in some way encouraged, or was that just out of the blue?
That was something, like I said, that my estimates is about 500,000 people saw it based on Facebook shares and the data I got back. And so the dealers were people saying, we have storefronts, we have websites, this is a cool product, we would like to feature it. When you figure out your wholesale numbers, let us know. I didn't really solicit that out front. I did have one reward level, and if you're not sure how Kickstarter works, a pledge is called the reward level. It's levels of how much money they can give you for a product back, is basically the gist of that. And one of them was a wholesale, 100 bags if you wanted it. And I had 3 people taking up on that. We did some custom logo work at that level too. And so people kind of knew I was thinking that direction, I guess, towards the end. But I didn't really. Kickstarter has a limit on the rules about you can't really. It changed a little bit. They keep bouncing back and forth. You can't sell quantity, but after you already funded them, they're going to get their money. Kind of slide it in. I don't think they're going to they're not gonna really slap their wrist for that one, because all you're doing is making more money, so they care. But, yeah, but they don't really want you to get wholesale. It's not for wholesale, so you kind of have to backdoor it and email people outside of Kickstarter to confirm that. But,
So their official take is you are not allowed to, but basically what people are doing is like just put twice the pledge on a product and then you get 2 of them. And so they want your money, Kickstarter. So they want,
Well, as much as you want, write me an email, I'll send you what you want,
Greg has more comments.
Yeah, just up on the IP, intellectual property, so trademark makes sense. You don't have to have a registered trademark. A registered trademark costs money, we get you additional protection. Stuff like Noel is doing down there is trademarked, probably without being a registered trademark, right? You know, you have registered your design.
It's copyrighted, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, copyright protection. Patent protection, I have a patent with multiple patents in the process right now. That's a long and expensive process. I mean, that's easily 10 or 15,000, even if you do a lot of work yourself. But you can get a provisional patent. And if you're what's called a micro entity, which means you don't make more than a certain amount of money per year, don't have a big business, it's $65 if you do all the work yourself. And that gives you a year of kind of pseudo protection before you have to get a real patent to move forward. So there's some options there.
Did you do your patent searches in-house, or did you farm those out to a professional?
A mix of that. You can do a lot yourself, so you can spend a lot of money just doing patent searches and paperwork. But you can do a lot yourself. Google search for patent, there's a Google patent search which works well.
Yeah, I have experience with that too. It's like basically we had a patent on the wing design, and it tends to you can try to search for the patents online. And our experience was like, yeah, we found everything that was at the time out there, but someone got the patent assigned that was overlapping with ours when we went for the full patent. So it got like sections of it got rejected because we couldn't find it because it was not posted yet. So you can do a lot of searching, and at the end the patent is worth nothing, and all the money you spend on trying to protect it was just money that you threw out. So it happens too quite a lot.
This is changing directions a little bit. How involved is Kickstarter in the process of fulfillment? I mean, are they monitoring that?
They are not involved.
No, at all. So
once you funded, you're on your own.
Yeah, it's not only you're on your own, but they are also basically their approach is also from the backer's standpoint. It is you are donating the money. It's donation, and if you get something back, that's all under the discretion of the person that is running the campaign. It normally works out that the people that are running the campaigns don't want to lose their face, and they basically taint their name by not fulfilling the Kickstarter. But I've seen several where people basically disappeared from the face of Earth because they couldn't cope with the pledges at the end.
So, I mean, we keep talking about this void or whatever, this idea that you get your money and then you're really stressed out and you can't fulfill. I guess what I'm not understanding is as long as you communicate with that base of people who finance you.
That's a different
that
thing.
scary?
These are two different things. One thing is fulfilling the Kickstarter and then getting more orders afterwards to continue selling your product after you fulfilled the Kickstarter pledges. That's what we are talking about, the ditch afterwards, where you fulfilled everything. Every backer got their rewards for the product, and what now? It's like, how do you transition from that to having an online store or anything where people actually are buying a product on? That's the problem. It's really difficult. It's like from my experience.
Well, I think kind of to that, the strength to me of Kickstarter is that it engenders a sense of community around your product or brand or idea. And it's on you as a creator to manage that community. And some people have managed their communities very successfully, and some people have managed their communities less successfully. And I think some of the feedback I got after my Kickstarter was that people appreciated, I mean, I was very upfront with this is what I'm asking for, and this is how I'm splitting out the budget. This is how much I'm spending on a space, how much I'm spending on advertising, how much I'm spending on this and this and this and this, and breaking it down as minutely as possible, and as being as open and transparent as possible with the people who were generous towards my idea. Because Kickstarter is pretty much a black box. And there really isn't, like Peter said, there's no protection in place for a backer against somebody just cutting and running, other than our basic humanity. So it really is. And I think people on Kickstarter and people who are familiar with Kickstarter understand that. And so they respond positively to transparency, and they respond positively to people who are willing to kind of, even in bad cases where things are going downhill post-Kickstarter, people are willing to respond positively to you saying, this is what the problem is, this is what I have going on, and being transparent with this community creative.
Let me ask everyone to kind of get a little more detail into that. So what kinds of, you said you were very transparent and gave people some updates on terms of like, this is the budget of what will be spent for what. I mean, what did each of you do in order to interact with your backers from kind of the end of the campaign through the fulfillment process?
I think it helps to illustrate where the funding is going. I think that's really helpful. I didn't do that as much with my first project. Just said it was going towards the cost of a new line. Sure, I think that's pretty vague. I have a project going right now where I try to be more specific, which is just where more specific where the money is. I think that helps in my opinion.
For me, like Tim was saying, the communication is absolutely paramount. I've backed a few projects since mine, and people who communicate really well, you have a sense of trust, you know things are going on. I have one that it should be arriving next month. It was supposed to arrive in December, and their communication at one time was like 2 weeks, just crickets. I mean, people were on a mutiny, and we were ready to write a Kickstarter and say, hey, they're out of here, but they slowly come back, and stuff like that. For me, you can put your budget out if you'd like, if that's something you think is important to your backers. For me, I did not do that. For me, mine was all about manufacturing. My brand is built on American manufacturing, so I showed them we're building these things in America. We were very honest about that. I wrote on Kickstarter, we run an update, send an email to all your backers. So I wrote an update every single week. So that is expectation that no matter if nothing was going on, I'd say, hey, we're still working, it's still going well, I'm still talking to you, you're still talking to me, we're still in contact. After the Kickstarter had funded, I moved that to about every 15 days, 9 days range. And if a problem came up, I would try to solve it, and then I would come right to them and say, hey, we had a delay, it's what's going on, we're handling it this way. And so I kept people pretty active. We did actually get our shipping deadline for everything, which is shocking on Kickstarter. Most projects are late, and I didn't know that was an option, so I did whatever it took to hit the deadline. And we had the biggest packing party you've ever seen, but now I know it's an option, that late's an option, but I still want to do it. You had a question?
Quick question. On the other side of the spectrum, as a runner or a backer, is there such thing as too many updates, like too frequent?
Yeah. I had a lady one time write me and say, too many updates, you need to stop doing it. And I wrote her back and said, you can go through your preferences and uncheck the box of updates. I mean, but I had 1,224 backers I'm not going to sacrifice because they don't like my emails, So that's kind of on them to check in and check out if they don't want it.
I was thinking for the health of the campaign, is it possible for that to backfire?
Yeah, I mean, I think a week, I write a 30-day campaign. I think that's a good amount of time to run alone. But yeah, if you're writing an update every 2 days, people might just be like, okay, stop talking to me, you're creeping me out here. I don't know, you gotta feel it out. It's your personality, it's the personality of your community.
I'm interested in funding levels because I walked in late, but it sounds like most of you are manufacturing and one of you is an individual artist, is that correct?
Yeah.
So what kinds of funding levels were you going for based on what you could provide?
I specifically tried to get a wide range of funding levels among the panelists when I was inviting people. So Noelle, her first campaign funded at just over 5,000, 5,500 and so. And has a current campaign with I think your target's 7,000. And when I checked on Friday, it was just over 1,000, so well on the way.
1,700.
So continuing to move along. So and Garrett had a much larger campaign, had over 1,000 backers, 1,224 backers, and the total funding of $46,000. So, Tim was running a local theater production, and that one ran at a much more modest 700 and something. So that was enough to pull that particular event off. And then Peter was a fewer number of backers, 293 backers, but ended up at over $84,000 pledged for the campaign.
I can add one more thing. It's I read some people analyzing Kickstarters in general. It's not about Kickstarter pledge levels or the amount of people. The amount of people in many cases ends up at a very similar level. It's like more or less capped off by the biggest projects running at 1,000. It's like there are exceptions to that, but this is like successful Kickstarters. Most of them, 1,000 people back it, and how much money they make depends on how high the pledge levels are. So their result, this is the funny part, the higher the pledge levels, the more money you will end up with having, independent of how many people back it. It's like, I've seen friends of mine run a different campaign for a GPS system. It's, to get one of these devices is $500. So you have to spend $1,000 to get a full system because you need 2 of them for what they have. And so a backing level of $1,000 a piece. So, and they still did, I think, I'm not 100% sure, $800,000. So it's very, very dependent of what you're selling and how much you can ask for it. And it's not about quantity, it's about the price.
Let me drill down on that subject a little bit more. So it's how did each of you structure your rewards for the campaigns that you did? And did you put limits on the rewards? I mean, what were sort of the thoughts that you put in behind that? Tim, you want to know?
At least for me, and I think the common thread between, because we are at all kind of disparate levels of how much we're trying to reach, the common thread really is having a very clear goal in mind and knowing what you want to do. I knew that I needed, $500, $600 to do a show, so I wasn't any more ambitious than that. Excuse me. In terms of pledge levels, like Peter was saying, it was very surprising to me because I thought I was going to, excuse me. It was really surprising to me because I thought that I was going to use the Kickstarter to basically pre-sale tickets for the show. So, 100 tickets, 80 tickets at $5 a piece, and then assorted other donations to kind of meet my goal. But the surprising thing for me was I ended up pre-selling very few tickets for the show at a $5 level and receiving a lot more donations at a $25, $15, $50 level than I thought I was going to get. So I differ, I think, from everybody else on the panel in that I wasn't producing a physical good. I was producing a show, which really helped me out kind of on the back end after Kickstarter was over. But it also leaves fewer incentives to, I'm not selling something. I'm not sending somebody something in the mail. So this kind of, like you were saying, my reach was way more local than anything else. So my rewards were things that kind of provided a personal touch to what I was doing. So, handwritten notes. I produced a poster, so we sent out autographed posters to people who pledged at a higher level. Thank you cards, that kind of thing. Things that connected me and connected the people who were in my group with our backers. And so that was kind of the incentive there, that you have a personal stake in this creative act. And we were talking a little bit earlier about communicating with our backers, and that was also kind of part of the deal. So my updates were always very focused on our rehearsal process and the work we were doing. So I would take a lot of pictures. We shot video a couple of times and put it on our blog. I blogged a couple of times using the updates, just kind of about improv theater in general, and so did like little mini, like, this is how you do improv, little kind of spiels. So it was all about kind of, and again, interacting with the community created. And the rewards that I set up were also about interacting and fostering that community that I created.
Gary, I know yours was a physical product that had a particular price point. And, as you mentioned, sort of like having a high level, it's like if you wanted 100 of them. Right. And what else did you do around reward structure?
I think what Peter's saying is absolutely right. There are a limited number of backers. I've seen very few products go over 1,000 backers, but I've seen lots of products go over $1 million. So it's this weird kind of, I don't know, I mean, like I said, I have my background in engineering, so I can analyze stuff and look at it, just, spend all day trying to figure it out. But I'm really excited to run another Kickstarter. Based on that, I want to do one that's a higher price point. You have to include shipping on your backing. You can't be like, this is the price, oh, it had shipping. You can, it doesn't really work that well. But this was $18 shipped in the U.S. I had two sizes, I had a small one and a big one. That was my most common purchase. It was $35 for both of those because people just didn't know what size they were. So my most common pledge was a $35 level. You get 1,000 backers, you end up at 46,000. It's I had a $500 pledge, 1,000 backers, we're looking at $500,000. Then I had a few custom options. I had full-on like wholesale custom options. And I sold 3 of those at $1,700. So there were some upward numbers there. So that's what really pushed mine higher, was those higher price.
Do you have anything between kind of that sort of $50 level?
Yeah. I had you can buy 1, you can buy 2, you can buy 5, 10, 100 kind of. Okay. For me, it was just a quantity break. I mean, other people will do, if you do have a kind of brand, you might have, entry level. Let's say you're in a clothing brand, you might have a T-shirt, you might clear up to like, a full-on jacket or something like that. And that might be from $10 to $500. For me, it was just quantity differences.
Well, I noticed on your new campaign, I think that you actually have limits on every reward level. Is that correct?
I do, and I did on my first campaign. I think I did most of the rewards for the first campaign.
So is that sort of just to make sure that it stayed at a manageable level?
Yes, it's keeping things manageable, yeah, and sort of controlling, as the project evolves, and where are people pledging more of and less of, and where do I want to steer people based on the price points. I learned a lot from my first project of what not to do. I didn't really know what I was doing. Selling your artwork is a whole other mental challenge itself. So for me to make a project and say, ask for money in advance for art or something, it was, it takes courage. I think all of these, any project you do like this is going to take courage. And I applaud people that take that lead. But for me, I felt like I needed to give people some kind of deal. I don't know why. I just thought, because they were pledging in advance, I wanted to give them something special because they were taking a risk on me. So that's probably why I think I broke even hand, and my project was kind of a nightmare. I gave people, and I forgot to mention that my T-shirts were made in America T-shirts because I feel like that's important as we're all creators here and we want to keep projects going here. So the ironic thing was the Made in America T-shirts really had quality, and I didn't realize that until I got them, and I felt really bad sending them out to people. But I gave people too many choices, and so I really recommend don't give people too many choices. I let people choose made in the USA or organic, because I couldn't get both. The shirt color, men's and women's, and sizes, and designs, and I had 7 new designs. And they could pick and choose, and really think about when your project, what time of year you're going to do your project. Because my project ended right before I went into Christmas rush. So I was filling all this at the same time that I was trying to get ready for the holiday market here in Eugene, and it was a learning experience. But just, I would say don't feel like you have to give people a discount or a deal. They want to support you and they believe in you.
Something that works well though, with the rewards is to have an early bird special.
So one of the keys for success in Kickstarter is get momentum early on. If you put it on Kickstarter and then start telling people about it, and then it's too late. So if you don't get any momentum in the first week, it's all over. So that early bird special helps. The other part we talked about preparing for Kickstarter is make sure you have all your initial backers lined up before you launch.
So that's a good question. So that for everyone going down the line, if you wouldn't mind, what did you do in advance of the campaign? What kinds of things did you do to in preparation? Or sort of did you have an audience somewhat lined up that you could, get with an email blast? Hey, look, my Kickstarter is now off the ground.
So we thought we did. I think that, yeah, this is like, there's so many like great truths. Like I want to confirm, like having as few different rewards as possible. Like we had already too many. We had like 4 different types of setup, and that was already very painful. But we tried to like reuse as much of the components between each other, and it's like I can't even imagine how hard it had to be. Yeah, line up beforehand. This is something that we definitely learned. That you need to have not only the backers lined up. I think it's even more so news outlets that will advertise, because this is what I've seen a lot in very successful Kickstarters. They basically had, before they even started the Kickstarter campaign, they already were leaking out like, yeah, we are planning to do a Kickstarter for this product. Look, it's interesting. You want to be an early backer because we will have only a few of the really early stuff. And this plays off in most cases very well.
When I was at Maker Fair in San Mateo last May, I was in at least 30 booths where I had done exactly. We will have Kickstarter next month. So.
Yeah, that's people are learning exactly that lesson, and it's like you see it across the board. That you want to preload basically the move, and definitely we didn't have any limits on our rewards. This is something I've learned over the time watching other campaigns and so on. You want to have this like early prototype or whatever. That's a very good thing, because this motivates people to actually back first and then not back out again, because I will not get that deal again, because if I have this one pledge that is limited at 100 and I give up that pledge because I changed my mind. If I change my mind again, because that happens, then I will not get that super deal anymore. So you keeping these people more like bought into your project, then yes, the communication is also very important.
Did any of you guys invest money into that process of launching your campaign, into advertising? Does anyone have experience with that?
So we decided not to launch a Kickstarter at this point, although we're considering coming back to it. And if you look at a lot of the big, particularly the hardware launches that go really, really big, $1 million kind of campaigns, they all hire PR firms. We're looking at spending $10,000 to $15,000 just in PR if we come back and launch later. And certainly there's some costs associated with you need a nice video, you need to get the word out, and a lot of times without a PR firm, you're not getting in the major blogs. There's some you can get into, but a lot of the big ones, that's the PR firm getting you in the door. And there's one big PR firm that's done most of the really big, at least the technology startups. There's one PR firm that does them all, and there's a cost associated with it.
Yeah, we didn't have any investment. We didn't invest into that, and I don't think that is necessarily needed. Like for example, Castellar, one of the also quite a big Kickstarter. They used the community. But the people involved in that project already are Jerry Ellsworth in that case. She already has a huge following on YouTube and whatever. She can source from that group. If you have a group, if you have a name that you can source from, then you don't really need to do that. Also, most of the people that I personally know that ran Kickstarters didn't invest into. What you should invest into, though, or consider investing, is a very good video. this is like, if your video, if you don't consider yourself that you are able to make a really good video, then you really have to hire someone, because the video sells the whole campaign very much. And also knowing people in the different blogs, it's like, again, yeah, you can go to a PR firm and just spend money on this, unless you have contacts in the blogs. Our experience was also like, oh yeah, we will just launch the campaign and then we will send like any of this, like Gizmodo or whatever. There is like this button you can like say, oh, there is an interesting thing. They don't read those emails. This is just a bucket that they put stuff that to get people like out of the way so that they don't bug them too much. And if you have to know editors in the blogs themselves directly to be able to contact them directly and say like, here, please write an article about us. You have to know them. If you don't have this contacts, then you need to hire also someone if you want this kind of pitch.
And I will kind of second that about the video. It is extremely important. I think if you go back and look at my project, please don't. My video is, it's very, I mean, it's 3 guys messing around in a theater with a cell phone for 45 minutes. But even with 3 guys messing around in a theater with a cell phone for 45 minutes, I still paid attention to communicating the important information about my Kickstarter. It wasn't just, haha, let's have a laugh by playing the video. It was, I need to tell you who I am, and I need to tell you what I'm doing, and I need to tell you what you'll get back and what I plan to do with your money. Even in that format of just kind of having fun, there's still a very concrete purpose to the video, and I could kind of get away with that with what I was doing because kind of the value proposition of what I was doing was kind of me personally as a creator creating something. So, it's you see me and me just kind of messing around and having fun. As to getting the word out before, that was also very critical to me because in my case, Kickstarter for me was a tool for converting, my social capital into actual dollar capital that I could spend on things. So, in advance of the Kickstarter, I was on Facebook, setting up, a Facebook group for Camerosity Improv Theater, getting as many people as I could to talk about Camerosity, and even kind of putting up some content outside of Kickstarter beforehand, so that when I did launch, there were people who were ready for what I wanted to see. And in terms of kind of, I think, since I was smaller, and even though I wasn't producing something, I didn't have to take into account the costs of production. Up front for me, I still budgeted everything out to the last penny, and rounded up to the nearest whatever as much as I could to kind of have a budget that would be fault tolerant. Because even though I wasn't producing something, I was still sending stuff out. I was still mailing things. I was still producing things, and on a smaller budget, going $10 or $20 over in postage is, 3 to 5% of my budget. So it's not nothing. And even for a $700 Kickstarter, I knew exactly what amount of those $700 I was going to be spending on things, and I knew for each pledge how much each pledge would cost me to fulfill, and took that into account when I set the pledge amounts, because I knew that 10% of this pledge is going away immediately to Amazon, and there's each poster is $1.50 to make, and poster mailers are so much, and postage to stick the poster in a poster mailer, and so even when you're not producing a thing and mailing a thing, there is still an intended cost of fulfilling your words. So a lot of my work before even starting the Kickstarter was researching how much things cost to do and forming some really realistic and some really pessimistic projections about how much I was going to have to, how much of the money I collected was not going to go to the show.
Garrett, can I ask you to take a slightly different take on the question as well? Is there anything that you would have done differently going into the campaign if you were doing it over?
Well, I do plan on running another campaign. Now I do have a captive audience, from the marketing I was able to do, so I will then be sending out more of a mass email thing. Here's just some practical notes if you guys are taking notes here for Kickstarters. The video is what your project is. That is the #1 priority. If you are like me, you have a limited resource of funds, put your efforts and money into your video. Hire someone who's professional. For my case, I have my laptop. You can see my video efforts if you'd like. My dad's now has a photographer in town. He's been doing it for 30 years, so I had that going through. My girlfriend, she's here. She's an art director. She just finished up a job at the duck store. So if you've seen those ads, that's who I had working on my video. It's a professional team. And we're shooting more videos this month for people. So put your effort into a good, concise, professional video. Because, we're probably a group of educated people. We read a lot, but not a lot of people read. They're going to watch 30 seconds of your video, and if they don't like it, they're off. I watched a video today for 7 seconds and turned it off because I was just like, this is awful. I don't even care what your project is. 7 seconds, you haven't got my attention, I'm out. And I didn't look at the project again. It's just painful to watch. So, the video. If you got a limited resource, put it into your product, put it into your video, your graphics on your page, and just look like you know what you're doing, even though you're working at your garage like me. The second thing that a lot of people put a lot of stock into is Facebook and Twitter. It's not worth anything. It will show you legitimacy. It'll show that you have people who like you, but your total sales from Facebook will be minuscule. They'll actually print them out for you on Kickstarter. Mine was less than 1%. So the next step would say tonight, if you have an idea and a project you want to do, go home and bookmark every single website that writes about that or blogs about that, and start figuring out who is on that site and what they write about. And just create a list for now. And then when you get ready to go on your page, you blitz out saying, hey, we're doing a project, we're going to Kickstarter, write them personal messages, try to find out what their name is so it doesn't look like a mail merge, and contact them. And for me, I got on Not Caught. I tried to get on Uncrave, you can get on there, but I got on a lot of blogs, and I saw a lot of revenue coming back from that. The other thing is, don't discredit the local paper. I actually know Bob Wells personally, he's now retired, but he wrote an article, and that article printed, and I went to the page and saw where backers were coming from, and Eugene, Oregon was up on the graph. It worked. So, that's good too. But, really watch how you pay for stuff. And if you don't have a lot of money, invest it into the image of the brand.
So. Did you do a video at all?
I did not do a video.
But you have a lot of good graphics because you've had one.
Yeah, my current project is no video either. I agree with them. I just don't have one. I can only handle so much. So. But I did have a lot of pictures in there working.
Where did your funders come from? Or was it primarily a Eugene basis, or did you end up needing to ship to a lot of other locations as well?
Because I have an email newsletter that I've been collecting for 10 years at different art festivals, and most of those people were in the Northwest. So that was primarily where my buyers were from, because they found me through my email newsletter and a little bit on Facebook, but not much. And then a few, just discovered me, you, I think, local person discovering, searching for who else was Eugene. Just a handful were that way.
Yeah.
You printed all those mail labels. How many of your restaurant actually went outside of Lake County or outside of the U.S.?
I did a few international, not many, maybe 3 or 4. I had 55 backers for my project, so not a lot.
Okay, so you're still probably on a national program.
I did a few international, but not many. So.
Yeah, I'll tell the story real quick. Well, it was my first Kickstarter that said, my wife came in and said, hey, what is Kickstarter? You keep hearing people talking about it. And he says, it's this website. And so have you done it? I was like, no, let's go check it out. Opened it up, and it has the nice thing for saying what is going on in Eugene. And yours was at that point in time like the one in the upper left corner of currently funding campaigns. It's like, oh yeah, we love her stuff. We got several prints at home, and clicked on it, and I think we were like, at that point you were $35 away from hitting the $5,000 mark. So there was like it's like, oh, okay, so we can get it to succeeding. Okay, sure, let's do it. And the whole process took something around 45 seconds from like, oh, let's Google Kickstarter to, oh yeah, they've just pledged money to something that I'm interested in. That's sort of like, and that was actually what impressed me the most about the process. Was sort of like, this was the least painful way for me to open my wallet for something I care about that I've ever gone through. So it's
They nailed the impulse buy.
yeah.
You know, since I was reaching out mainly to existing fans already, I would say 99% of my pledgers were people that already were familiar with my art. I was surprised at how many people had never heard of Kickstarter. So, and I would be working my art booth and tell people, I have a Kickstarter project going right now, and they wouldn't know what it was, and so I'd have to really briefly try to explain what it was. So you might come across that too. There's still a lot of people that don't know what it is.
So let's, and we've been sort of dancing around the question of fulfillment for a while, and that's been one of the big hurdles for a lot of people in this level of the stories that you hear about Kickstarter is that they do a reasonably good job of sort of helping you put together a campaign that's going to be successful and raise the amount of money that you need. But they kind of have a reputation of once you've got the people lined up, that it is kind of a, well, good luck, kid, and out the door you go. They sort of go dark at that point, and it's up to you to figure out how to do that without either losing your sanity or losing a lot of money on the campaign as a whole. So, what kinds of hurdles did each of you encounter in terms of production or distribution or shipping?
Yeah, fulfillment's a big part of it. Before I started mine, I came up with a plan for, let's say we just fund, and let's say we go over funding, and so this is plan A, this is plan B, and let's say we hit $100,000, this is plan C. And so I kind of had an idea of what to do before I got in there, before things went crazy. My manufacturer, basically I talked to him and said, how many can we produce in a week? How many can we produce in a month? Type of thing. And so I knew where those numbers were, those metrics were. When it came time for shipping, I used stamps.com. A lot of people use those. I heard a rumor that stamps.com.
What is that?
Just a website that you can print shipping through. Because here's the other thing too, like I think I'm a panel, I think I've had the most backers, 1,224. You can't go to the post office and stand in line with 1,224 packages and expect them to weigh them, punch in the address. I mean, the line will be on the door for a month. So you have to have a digital way of printing posters. So I use stamps, however you want to do yours. There's other programs out there. I would like to find another one because I was told that you could batch print. So from Kickstarter, they'll give you an Excel sheet of your backers, and I thought I could take that, copy and paste into stamps, and hit print on a label printer and watch them fly out the end. Didn't happen. It took me 2 weeks just to print all those labels. Because internationals have to be manually put in. And I had 400 international shipments and stuff like that. And you have customs forms and stuff like that. So I had, I just bought cases of envelopes through Uline is a great source for that. They're the polypropylene, self-adhesive kinds. I use a thermal label printer because you don't want to be taping anything. You just want to peel and stick. So you got to come up with a plan of how you want to do this quickly. And then I called the post office and said, do I need to do anything special to bring in 1,000 envelopes? And they said, no, just we'll leave a card in the back and we'll shove them in. And that's what I did. And then, come up with friends and family about a packing party. I didn't think of this, but we had to roll all these up. They're made flat, and we had to roll these bags into the thing. Oh my gosh, you talk about carpal tunnel. But if you came by my house, it was sitting down, here's a stack of bags, and decided to roll it, let's go. And so that took 2 days of rolling, and then we just had, we had them all by color and size of boxes, and you just pick up an envelope, and it said right on it what was in it, and you can stuff the envelope and then throw it in the crate. And so, you got to think about how do you want to do that, what's your packaging looking like, shipping. The thing I didn't price up too well was Kickstarter does take roughly 10% off the top between Amazon and their fees. That also comes out of your shipping. So one of my shipping price point levels for international was $9 shipping. It's $8.88 to send it to London. 10% of $9.90. I'm in the hole now, 80 cents per package. You send 100 packages overseas, you're looking at $80, you're out, and then just compounds and snowballs from there. So make sure you really know what it's going to cost, and then add at least 15% to that to do it.
Can I ask also, did you have any, because you did have the largest number of backers of anyone on the panel, did you have any trouble with people who were not filling out their survey forms, or you had trouble hunting them down afterward?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I guess it's triaged by the masses. You try to stick to your core group, and I think I had about $1,000 of declined credit cards right off the bat. So that hurt pretty bad because you're expecting this number, and then you see that you don't get that number. So I messaged all of them and said, hey, whatever, can you write back? I got a lot of that back. I still didn't get a lot of it. And then I had 20 people who've never filled out their survey, and to this day still haven't filled out their survey. And I wrote them 2 messages, and then I'm out. I did my due diligence. I got to focus on the group, moved on. And I've had some people since then writing and saying, never got it. And I was right back, never got your survey, I need an address, because I can't mail it back to them. I had 4 come back from overseas, wrong address, from Australia, Malaysia, Philippines. I mean, these things went around the globe a few times, and I got them back yesterday. These shipped in October.
They got like 3 months.
Oh, yeah.
2 months, like it's Britain. Like we had also shipments like that.
Yeah, so one of those was my mistake. I sent it to Canada, I was supposed to go to Great Britain. Out of 1,000. That's pretty close. They're both either. They look like the Queen. They came back, whatever. And then that, it was pretty smooth. I had some people had some change of addresses. I know a lot of people say don't send out your survey until you're ready to ship, but I had to send out my survey because I had to know what colors to make, because I didn't just spec that out. So I have maybe 5 change of addresses. That's not that hard to manage. I felt like that would be okay, so I took the risk on that. And then I had one poor person that moved 3 times since I moved in. And I already shipped it. Like, I'm sorry, I don't even know what to tell you. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty small problems for them being people.
So you talked a little bit about how you've done some pre-planning in terms of like the numbers. So if I'm at, 1,000 bags, and this is the production schedule, and then 10,000 bags, and this with the soap. How did you talk a little bit more about that process? How did you plan for multiple sort of scales of production?
Well, like we've all talked about too, I think the theme here is the Kickstarter. You can fund and still have lost money or things like that. So minimum if this is going to work. For me, my goal was 10,000. So I knew minimum if it was going to work, I had to ship $10,000 worth of merchandise. So that was my base plan. And a lot of times when you get to that level, the scale from there up isn't much more challenging because you're already buying at a wholesale quantity. It's just instead of buying 50 cases, you're going to 100 cases, and you're going to get a better price point. So I priced everything with the worst case scenario, and just make sure your distributors who you're going through are big places that can handle that quick. I'm sorry, it's not 1,000 envelopes, it's 20,000 envelopes. They're not going to flinch at that. So that was kind of my plan. I just made sure I used people that could adjust to that. I would love to keep things local, but sometimes in Eugene you can't buy what you need locally, so you do have to go to at least somewhere else in the nation. Like I said, I use Uline. They're a huge shipping company, and you can get whatever you need in large quantities. So that's kind of how that goes.
Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about that question?
Yeah, so the shipping is a nightmare. So our production was basically like we made a calculation that starting a little bit earlier here. The $25,000 that we wanted in the first place just barely covered the injection molding molds production. This was our approach because we had some additional funding from somewhere else. I wouldn't do that again. I think do your calculation, worst case scenario as you said, but it's like go with the first wholesale amount that you're comfortable with. So in our case, let's say $100,000 would have been enough for this, and this is what you have to go with, and maybe even add some percentage on top of that for error in your calculation in the first place. If your Kickstarter campaign doesn't succeed because of that, good, because you are saving yourself so much pain and so much lost money because it didn't work out. Because you got the money, you have to fulfill it, but it's not enough money to fulfill it.
That's more or less where you ended up, right?
More or less, we had some. What we didn't really well anticipate is you have to pay for your food at your housing too. So it's like it's not only the product that you have to calculate, and you have to live too, and how long time will it take? Again, we didn't do a good enough estimate how long it will take to fulfill, or to get the product done and fulfill. So this is something think about it 5 times before you do it, not even twice.
So how long was the fulfillment process for your project?
It took almost a year. The interesting part was we got the product, so we had to we wanted to source as much as possible in the US. Sadly, in this realm of this consumer product stuff, the manufacturing in the US is partly dead, or if not completely dead. And so, for example, we had this wing that was out of foam. We tried to find an injection molding company here in the US that can do foam injection molding. We found someone, but they do it only for automotive. And so they don't even talk to you under 10,000 pieces of production. They don't even consider you anyone they should talk to. And the prices are just ridiculous. And we had to go to China to do this because there was no other alternative. And then you learn things like, oh, we found someone to do the plastic part injection molding here in the US, and we did the foam injection molding in China, but we need to have part of the plastic shipped to China. Don't do it. China has gag or blocking taxes on importing anything into China. It will kill you the prices of getting any product into China to produce it there, even if you are re-exporting it. That was something we didn't know. Anyways, so moving on from that to the actual fulfillment, like for example, what we didn't anticipate is shipping to Australia is very, very expensive. I didn't know that in the first place. Like compared to sending anything to Europe or anywhere else in the world, well, there are other places that are also very expensive, but Australia is shockingly expensive shipping prices. That was, I don't know if you had similar, but we had packages that were like table size. This is the size of the package, and this is making the price very expensive because they have like girth calculation that is very different than shipping in the US. Having something lined up for printing stuff, we just used the online shipping of FedEx and USPS. Basically knowing local shipments or US shipments in Canada will go through USPS and FedEx for part of the shipments outside of the country, like because we had batteries in it. USPS doesn't take lithium polymer batteries. They just, because they can burn or something.
They're afraid
it's a hazard.
Combustion there.
Yeah, it's understandable. I don't blame them. So we did it by foot. The break here is if we made more of the product, the quantity, if it would reach certain level, we wouldn't be able to fulfill it ourselves. We would have to hire someone to do it or do a party something. We had to produce a certain amount where it didn't make sense to do the assembly of the final product overseas or source it out. So we did everything ourselves. It's like you had to fold the bags. We had to solder like 10,000 LEDs onto wires and stuff like that, and glue 500 wings together, spars, and with several parts, and put plastic into it. Solder wires to the controller and motor controllers, everything together, and then put it in a package. So basically fold also the cartons, put some foam into it so that it doesn't get banged up, put the wings inside, count the parts that are in there, add an instruction manual in it, close it all up, tape it up. We all did that ourselves. So after we already had all the parts on our desks, it still took 3 months to fulfill with 4 people working full time on this. So it's like sourcing it out might have been less painful, but I probably might have even taken longer because you have to teach people how to do it, and we were intimately familiar with what we are doing, and we could iterate and improve on our process as we go. So it is a viable process, but from the amount that we did, it's like, it is a full-time job. It's like doing it on the side was in our case, completely impossible.
This has been touched on, but I'm surprised how many people go on Kickstarter or Indiegogo and haven't figured out how they're going to make the product. So once they're successful, then they go out and try to find a manufacturer, then they try to figure it out. If it's a small volume product and you're going to make it yourself, time yourself and see how long it's going to take. You may think, oh, I'll hand make 500 of these. And then you say, wait a second, those are taking me 3 hours each. How am I going to pull this off? And an ironic thing is, as the volume goes up, often the price increases at some point. So you make them yourself and your labor's free, sort of, right? You're not paying for yourself at least. And then as the volume gets up, you reach a point where you can't make yourself anymore. And now you need to hire somebody, and the price actually increases. So we were looking at our product in small volume. Hey, we can make this thing for $15. But as the volume goes up, at some point it becomes a $100 part. That's not expected. And then we get to a point we get into China, and then now it goes back down to what we could hand make the thing for. So talk to the manufacturers up front, get quotes. If you don't need tooling, like Peter needed, have them make some, see how the process goes, make sure you've proven that this is the manufacturer you want, so you're not figuring those things out after you've already had your Kickstarter campaign run.
Okay, great.
Getting anything done is work and needs a lot of commitment. And I still looking forward to the, I think there will be another opportunity to make a Kickstarter campaign for me, and I'm looking forward to that. It's a lot of fun too, because it's like you meet a lot of people, you get a lot of interesting contacts. You get a huge amount of gratification to yourself, like I did it, I finally managed to finish that. So it is still worth it. What I think everyone here is saying is like, just don't just do this, or try not to do the same mistakes we did. It's like, and try to learn from others. It's like really spend days, weeks to research what others did. People are writing about their experiences on Kickstarter. They are writing their ideas how to run a Kickstarter. They are diverging in many directions, and try to find a sweet spot that you think, oh, that makes sense, and this is what I would do. You still will make mistakes. It's like, it's inevitable. But yeah, it's an awesome process, because you are working directly with your customer. You don't have anything intermediate. You are more or less your character, your person is out there. It's like, unless you don't like people, that's then don't do Kickstarter, because you have to deal with people. But it's like there are negative experiences. People are writing sometimes nasty things, but mostly only because you did something wrong and you didn't talk to them. It's like, this is mostly what happens. Like, you don't write. So in our case, we wrote I think once at the end, once a month. But we did a complete video with like a video blog showing how the process goes, what we did. Like, here we are packing all the T-shirts that we had for One Reward level. It's like a time lapse of us packing this stuff. We did flight tests. We went out into the field and flew the new prototypes. Showed like, oh, here's my colleague, he's flying it, and like, look, it is flying, it works, or here we are assembling it. So we did actually video blogging every update. So we did it once a month. It might have been not frequent enough. I think every 2 weeks is a better thing. You did it every 1 week, but you wrote something. That's probably fine too. I wouldn't do it more often. But anyways, the experience is great if you communicate with the people. They're forgiving, incredibly forgiving for any slip-ups that you have if you are honest about it, like bluntly honest. I screwed up, I am very sorry. It's like, if you really screwed up. But in most cases, actually, it's like people that are doing the Kickstarters are putting so much energy into it. It's mostly, they did their due diligence in most cases. And if there are rather rare occurrences where the people running the campaign actually are at fault. Most cases like, oh, the manufacturer that I contracted to do something is not on time, or they made a mistake or the stuff that I told them to do, they didn't do right or something. That's from my experience in most cases. And people are very, very understanding. It's like, oh yeah, of course, I understand that this happens. And they are fine, as long as you communicate this. And then you have very, very nice contacts and a group of new friends to work on an awesome project that you were committed to because you started the campaign in the first place.
So yeah, I'm definitely very pleased with how my Kickstarter turned out. And when I conceived it, it was to do one show in August with a group of friends and to do a show that I had in my mind. And I think I can probably speak for everybody here and probably most of you in the audience when I say that it is an incredibly fulfilling thing to take something that's in your head, to take an idea and turn it into a thing, whether it be a physical good or a show. That's one of my favorite experiences in my life, is when I get to move something from concept into reality. I love that. So I was very satisfied with how my Kickstarter turned out. And as it turned out, between the money that I raised on Kickstarter and the money that I took in from that first show, I was able to fund a second show out of that. And then after that show, I have a group of people now together who we're working together. We're shooting video content. We're working on our first web series. We're planning a third show for sometime in the spring. And it's kind of become a self-sustaining entity out of that first Kickstarter. So it's worked out very well for me. And I think there are some specific projects that we're working on, like this web series, that I would definitely consider turning to Kickstarter again to fund if we needed to find funds for equipment, etc. Because it has been a very good process, and it's helped the shows work because it's provided an audience that's involved in what I'm doing. Because people already have some skin in the game because they've given me $25 or what have you. So there are people who are interested in seeing me succeed and interested in telling other people about this cool thing that they've given money to. So for me, that community has been the most valuable thing that I've gotten out of Kickstarter. Even more valuable than the money, because I have people who are enthused about these shows. So as I move forward, it's easier to get people to come to a show because I have people who are connected to Panelists and Improv Theater. So definitely managing that community, I think, has been the best thing that I think I did during that Kickstarter process.
I'm actually in the process of planning out a second Kickstarter, so yeah, I would do another one again. I would just encourage you guys, if you're thinking seriously about doing one, to maybe go on the website, back projects, see how it works. There is a book called the Kickstarter Handbook. You can check that out, and it can give you some good concrete tips. And then find projects that are either past or current that you like, and maybe just contact them and say, hey, I'm looking at doing one, do you have any tips or this, that. I had a lot of people contact me, and I was willing to, if I had time, write them back and try to write them back. But it was a fun project. It was exciting to see people actually have value in something created. That's always something I think as humans we look for, is to make something bigger than ourselves and see that it is well received. And Kickstarter can be something that gives you that kind of satisfaction. So yeah, in the end, it was a lot of work, and now it's the second phase of growing a business from that. But it was worth it. I enjoyed it.
I did learn a lot from my first project, and I just started on another one. It took me about a year after the first one to sort of plan for my current one. And even just after this meeting, I'm thinking of things I would like to change a little bit. For me, it was hard to decide which project I had. I was really torn between a more altruistic nonprofit project that I mentioned earlier, Art for a Cause, and then the current one, which I have, which is actually called Great Dogs of History. I do people that aren't familiar with my work, I do animal art. It's very whimsical. A lot of dogs and cats, but all animals. And the current project is Great Dogs of History. So I have a painting called Newton's Dog, and this project will fund like Einstein's dog and Darwin's dog. So if these people had dogs, what were their dogs? I want to incorporate that person's science or history into the artwork. So Einstein's dog, for example, will have something to do with the theory of relativity. I haven't figured it out exactly yet, but Da Vinci's dog has to do you know, the Vesuvius man, and it's the Vesuvius dog. So things like that. And so I want to take all these different people's dogs and make it really fun. And so that's my current project, which I just started. And I did make the goal higher than the first time, which is a little scary too with Kickstarter, because with Kickstarter it's not fun that it doesn't happen, whereas with Indiegogo you can still get your funding even if you don't meet your goal. They just take a higher percentage. So that's really something you want to think about too. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, to say thank you to Craig, Peter, Tim, Garrett, and Noel for volunteering their time to come out here this morning and talk to everyone about their experiences with Kickstarter. And I'd like to put in my advertising plug for Eugene Maker Space at this point in time as well, if you don't mind. This event was sponsored by Eugene Maker Space. At Eugene Maker Space, we believe that a more interesting world is possible and that we can make it happen. So we provide tools and space to create, and our members provide ideas to transform their worlds through collaboration as well as independent exploration. Our members learn new skills and work with technology to empower them and give them the freedom to make whatever. So we cordially invite you to join us with some information at the back of the room about EMS and some upcoming events. We've got a Eugene Mini Maker Fair that we're co-sponsoring with Science Factory for the third time this coming June. And I hope that everyone will have an opportunity to come out to that. And if you are interested in doing Kickstarter at some point, maybe we can be a resource for you for if you don't want to have your personal garage or living room taken over by a thing. We have some space that might be able to help you. So once again, thank you to everyone for coming out and, as I said, generously offering your time to help inform other people who are interested in this process. And we've got the room for another 25 minutes or so, so if people want to hang out, I think we probably have an excess of bagels and coffee, so if you want one, feel free. And thank you for coming out.